Hello, we're back to finish out week 8 concepts, talk about what the final draft should look like, and we click on 8.2 understanding concepts, which offers thoughts on reflection and revision with a reminder that this class, while it's teaching you about rhetoric and ethos and logos and reminding you of those sorts of things, the class is also about writing. So this is going to be a little bit of going back to some basics, and some of you roll your eyes. You're like, my papers are perfect. And I'll let you know they're not. I might have already shown you this slideshow, and it's attached there in Understanding Concepts, but it describes the difference between editing or looking for big picture or higher order concern kind of stuff, or proofreading or lower concern, sentence level stuff. And for some examples, if you are editing, you're thinking about the bigger ideas like, do I have a purpose statement? Does the purpose statement make sense? Does my paper follow a logical organizational pattern? Do I have transitions? Do I have a reference or works cited page that matches to all the sources I mentioned in the text? Those are major things. But if you're thinking about proofreading, you've already gone through the paper for the big picture stuff, and you should do this in stages. You set it aside, you go back for proofreading, and then you're thinking about grammar, punctuation, what kind of tone or style did you use, your word choice, and your audience can set the tone for how you're going to address them. Can you be more formal or less formal because of the sort of audience you chose to lay out your position to? I really suggest not thinking about deleting significant portions of your paper. I feel like if you have something to start from, that is the best place to be, because then you just need to whittle it down and make it pretty. And you can do that by looking for things like implied phrasing. There are certain phrases you can delete, especially if you have the audience they can understand you're saying that and you don't need a certain set of words, or if you've been redundant in your wording and you said something twice and you haven't realized it. I love deleting for these sorts of things to kind of clean up your prose. There's ways that you can revise your work in trying audio methods. There's visual tricks you can try. And of course, like I've mentioned, to work in stages and avoiding the temptation to never proofread, which, I mean, we've all been there, but when you go to look at your grade, you're like, okay, that makes sense because I didn't do anything. And I know when you didn't do anything. And even if you use something like Grammarly or you're relying on Microsoft Word, it's still going to miss things that are spelled correctly, but when you read it, it doesn't make sense. And remember that there's other resources you can look at to help you, like Tutor Me or the USF Writing Studio. They're not going to edit your shit for you. You need to do that. But they're going to identify certain trends or patterns and tell you how you can edit for those sorts of things yourself. Now, getting to really what you're probably wondering about, the final draft and manual changes. I want to see the changes on your draft. And what do I mean by this? I'm going to show you right now on the student sample. Before you start revising your draft, you need to be aware of the manual changes thing, because otherwise you're going to be pissed off. You're going to have to go back and show me what you did. So say you have the collective feedback file open and you're like, I'm going to change this or that. Before you do it, note that if I'm going to see your changes, anything you add needs to be in red or a different color. So you should pick a color to use before you start typing additions. You're like, oh, I need to add a lot more detail here, and I'm gonna see my changes and blah, okay, there she can see them. But say you're like, I need to delete this part and reword it. You're gonna use something called strike through. And you're gonna show me those two sorts of changes, which should be taking place in a final draft, additions and deletions, but you're going to show me them in a very manual and a little bit of an exhaustive way, because I want to see your messy changes. I don't want to see a perfect draft that's turned in without any changes, because in my mind, that means you made 0 changes and you've submitted the same rough draft you've already submitted, and your grade is going to suffer. But if you want to get a good grade, your draft is going to look something like this throughout. Not a crazy amount, but not, 5 times of, an addition here, a deletion there in each paragraph, and I'm done. It should actually be things that you planned on changing because you read the CFF, because you also went back to the discussion where you can see your peer review feedback and they offered you like some good sentence level suggestions. You went back and you looked at your the tutor suggestions or whatever works for you. If you have done editing like this before, you're like, but I can just use track changes. I mean, you're right. You could go to review and hit tracking and click track changes, and anything you add or anything you delete, Microsoft Word does it for you. And I love that function. But you know what I don't like? I don't like USF Rights, because when you upload a paper to USF Rights that you used track changes on, it converts it to a PDF, and I cannot see any of your changes. And it ends up, your draft ends up looking like you did nothing, even though you did use track changes. It's crazy. If you're like, I'm not going to do manual changes, I'm still going to do track changes and it's going to be fine, you totally could, and it might work faster for you. Just to make sure that I can see your changes with track changes, what you need to do is open up, after you're done, open up a blank document. This is also a pain in the ass, but that's if you choose to. You could say you're done, you did a lot of whatever, control print screen, or use this snipping tool. Copy what's on your screen, control F. And you would have to do that for every page. But when you do that and you're going to save it as, you're going to save it as a PDF or whatever, because those are essentially pictures, the changes that you made, they're going to be stuck. And once you upload it to USF, I can still see your track changes. So that's an idea. You don't have to do what I just did, but you definitely have to show me your manual changes by changing the font color at least. And because I have track changes on, it's doing that. By changing your font color for additions, or using strike through for any deletions. And if you have questions about that, please ask me. But if you submit a clean draft for me, a draft that shows 0 changes or minuscule changes, your grade will suffer, because a final draft is not about turning in what you think was already perfect. A final draft is, what did you fix, where and how did you make the draft shine? That is what you're getting that grade for. And so if there are no substantive changes, you're not going to get enough scare tactics. Let's go to the final draft assignment, which offers you the guidelines to look at, just more ideas that you can have alongside your draft. Kind of tick down that list and make sure you did that stuff. And it even has a pictorial representation of a marked up final draft. And the student, they went a little crazy, but they showed me their changes. Because without the markups, your grade, again, will not be what you wanted it to be for the final draft. And it's due by March 6th. It's worth 60 points. And you're not gonna submit it here as it says. This is a placeholder. You're gonna go to USF Rights and you're gonna submit to where it says position paper final draft due Saturday, March 6th. If you have any questions about the final draft, then please email or text me via WhatsApp.